Hey guys, and welcome back to another Shadow Priest video. This time I wanted to make an updated version of my old video for just the single target rotation for Shadow Priest um, with all the new changes in 9.0.5. So I know that this video is coming pretty late. 9.0.5 has been out for a while, but with my old video I was running the Talbadar's Legendary, so things were different, right? And this time I'm running Shadowflame Prism, which is now best in single target for most Shadow Priests. If you're a Night Phase Shadow Priest and you've got decent gear, then it's probably best in single target for you. And if you're a Necrolord Shadow Priest, then you have to have like really good gear for it to be best for you. Um, but most people should be either Necrolord or Night Phase, so you can sim yourself and see if maybe Shadowflame Prism is the best choice for you. This is what I run, so I have it in my head slot. I think the alternative is gloves, but I've got 226 gloves already from Mythic Sludge Fist, so I'm putting it in my head slot. Most of the Shadow Priests are running it on the head slot, but you can put it in your gloves. It just depends on how your gear is looking. Outside of that, I'm missing a couple sockets. This ring could have a socket on it. So if you're not keeping up with your MA dailies, I'm certainly not. Then you might be missing a couple sockets and things, and those are just straight stats, right? So if you want to increase your damage, that's one way to do it, right? Is just get more stats. So be doing your MA dailies, farming Stygia. If you don't know, you can buy sockets from Venari in the MA once you hit her exalted reputation. They cost like 7,000 Stygia, so it takes a while to get them, but they're definitely worth it. Outside of that, another big upgrade, I could upgrade these bracers I'm wearing. These are the ones from Mists of Tyrna Scythe, which I think are probably our best option. I know that there's a BOE from the raid that you can get that's pretty good as far as wrists go. But those are the ones I've been trying to get, and I haven't been like farming them hardcore. So I've only got the 210 version, but and I haven't gotten any since Valor was introduced, so I haven't upgraded these to 220 either. But if you can get a 220 pair of these bracers from Mists of Tyrna Scythe, I don't remember what they're called off the top of my head, but those are, a pretty good option. So, and then I'm running the Kabbalist Hymnal from Sire Denathrius on Heroic is the version I've got, and then I'm also running the Soul Letting Ruby. I've only got a 220 version because I haven't gotten one out of my weekly chest. So, okay, so that's basically, these are the enchants you want: Eternal Insight, 15 intellect on your bracers, and then these haste enchants and these gems. It depends on what your stats look like. Right now I'm gemmed and enchanted for haste, which puts me at about 28%. But it depends. If you're at like 30% haste and you've got lower mastery, maybe, this is something that you want to sim. Sims will tell you if your stat weights are different than mine and you want to do mastery instead of haste. But for me, at this present moment, haste is simming better than mastery for me. So in a single target situation like this, your stat priority is going to be intellect, haste, mastery. So it's most likely that you're going to want to gem and enchant haste and mastery. Haste or mastery, I should say. But there's a chance that something else is better for you. I don't know. So, and then for straight single target situations, you want to run Sinful Revelation on your weapon. A lot of people will say that's sim bait, but because almost every raid fight isn't just straight single target like this. The only exception is like Hungering Destroyer. But Sinful Revelation is best in that situation. It's just there are very few situations like that. So if you want to run Celestial Guidance, that'll probably get you. I mean, that'll be better in almost every raid fight, and it's still good in the single targets. So in the like one single target fight. So I would say Sinful Revelation if you're doing exactly this, or Hungering Destroyer, and then Celestial Guidance in all other cases. So, okay, so I'm gonna go through real quick. I already recorded this video, so I'm gonna go through and show you. I eat Tenebrous Crown Roast Aspic, which is just the haste food from Shadowlands. If you don't have a feast, obviously a feast is better than your own personal food, even the lower tier feast. So intellect is better than haste, pretty much always. So um, for pretty much everybody's stat weights, intellect is better than haste by like a significant amount. So the feasts give you intellect. There's no personal intellect food, so eat the feast. If there's no feast, eat haste food probably. But also you can sim yourself and just eat food that's the second highest stat weight for you. Anything that's not intellect. So haste is the second highest, so I'm eating haste. So I'm gonna eat this haste food, and then I also I use potions of spectral intellect when I'm doing these single target fights. You could also use Phantom Fire. Phantom Fire is arguably better on a single target fight like this, but I didn't have any on me in this video, so I'll pause right here too because I need to tell you about the talents. But I ran oh, so this intangibility, this row is actually it doesn't matter what you run here because they're all utility. So you could run Sand Lane if your group needs more healing. You run intangibility for a stronger dispersion defensive, or the typical go-to is body and soul. I just have intangibility because I was trying to solo the slime serpent earlier, and I was running that. So anyway, yeah. So I would suggest either Potion of Spectral Intellect or Phantom Fire. Phantom Fire, I think, is a little bit better in straight single target, but you know, not a huge difference. So okay, so then for single target, you want to run Fortress of the Mind. This just makes your Mind Blasts stronger. You're never going to use Unfurling Darkness or Death and Madness in a pure single target scenario. You might run Death and Madness anytime that there's going to be ads that you can snipe with it to get more insanity. And Unfurling Darkness is pretty much only used in PvP. Although you could make an argument that it's good in other places, but pretty much nobody uses it except for in PvP. Twist of Fate is our obvious choice for single target. Anytime your boss gets below 35% HP, you're going to start doing, I think it's 30% increased damage, something like that. Misery, I wish they would make Misery baseline, but Misery is just, it gives you the only benefit you get from running Misery in the single target scenario is that you save one global because you can apply Vampiric Touch and Shadow Word Paint at the same time. But the damage increase from Twist of Fate outweighs that pretty significantly. And then Searing Nightmare is just an AoE talent, so you're never going to use it. This row doesn't matter. If you need to interrupt stuff, run Last Word. Mind Bomb is only used in PvP, basically, and Psychic Horror is just the one I always have talented. It's really good in Mythic Plus, so doesn't matter what you run here. Auspicious Spirits is the go-to for single target. It makes your shades, your spirits, your shadowy apparitions. It makes them give you 2 insanity except for 1 instead of 1. You'll have more insanity gen, and they also do more damage, so that's good. Psychic Link would only be good if there were multiple targets, so you don't use that. And Shadow Crash is an okay alternative, but I mean Auspicious Spirits is just way better. So Shadow Crash, if you're like in Mythic Plus, Shadow Crash is good in Mythic Plus because you can use it on groups or whatever, and it's also not a huge DPS loss single target, but Auspicious Spirits is better, so run that. I'm rambling. Okay, so then whenever you're playing Shadow Flame Prism, you want to play Mindbender. Void Torrent is really good in single target, but with Shadow Flame Prism, you need to have your Mindbender as often as possible, so you play Mindbender. If you're playing Talbadars, you would use Void Torrent, or any other legendary, really. That's not Shadow Flame Prism. Damnation is also pretty much only ever used in PvP. And Mindbender is just necessary for Shadow Flame Prism. And then for the last row, Ancient Madness and Surrender to Madness are both kind of used only in Mythic Plus. Hungering Void will let you get longer Void forms, so you're going to want to play Hungering Void in single target fights. Because the idea is that you spend more time in your damage window, which is Void form, you're going to do more damage, right? Okay, so then moving on, uh, everyone should be using heavy desolate armor kits. Increase your stamina by 32 for 2 hours. Pretty cheap, so you just put it on your chest. These are just the obvious consumables. I use Shadow Core oil. This one should also be obvious. Everybody should be using that if you're a DPS player. And then I use spectral flasks of power. Again, that's the only flask we have right now, so that's what people use. If you do have a cauldron that gets put down or whatever, you can save yourself some money by using the cauldron flask. Another tip is if you don't use professions for anything, then you should pick up alchemy, because it makes your flasks last 2 hours instead of one. So if you're not using professions at all and you don't ever plan on using them, you can save yourself some money just by learning alchemy. It can just be level 1. You don't have to level it up at all. And you'll get 2-hour flasks instead of one. Okay, so now I'm going to do a pull timer and I'm going to show you, if you watch right here, this is all the stuff that I'm casting. So I'll try to go slowly through this to tell you what I'm doing. Hopefully it's not too bad. Okay, here we go. So I do a 10-second pull timer because that's what most groups do. Then as soon as it says 2, I pop my potion of spectral intellect. So this is kind of a habit that I've kept from BFA. Pre-potting is not important anymore because you don't get to use, your pot goes on a 5-minute cooldown, so you don't get to use another one. So this is probably actually a little suboptimal. You would save it for a couple seconds after the pull, but this is just a habit I have from BFA, and it helps time all your other abilities, because when you pop your Spectral Intellect potion, you can start spamming Vampiric Touch, and it'll start casting it almost exactly when you need to be. So you want to pre-cast Vampiric Touch. You can see I'm casting it. It's halfway through, and there's still 1 second left on the pull timer. You might want to save this for a little bit later than I start casting it, but you want to start casting Vampiric Touch before the pull timer finishes, so that way it goes off. You can see I pulled 0.3 seconds early, so maybe save your Vampiric Touch for 0.3 more seconds. But yeah, so you want to cast Vampiric Touch so that it goes off right when the pull happens, and your Shadow Word Pain you want to press immediately as your Vampiric Touch goes off, so you've got both on the target. And then the next thing we're going to cast is Fey Guardians. This is because I'm playing Naya, and I get Grove Invigoration, which gives you a ton of mastery. So you want to pop Fey Guardians immediately, and then after that you're going to pop your Mindbender, and then in between the global of your Mindbender and your next cast, you're going to pop your Power Infusion, and if you're playing Soul Letting Ruby, you're also going to use that. So you can see I popped both of those right after I cast my Mindbender. And then the next spell you're going to want to cast is a Shadow Word Death, and then a Mind Blast, and then you're immediately going to get into Void Form. So the reason you want to be in Void Form is so that you get more Mind Blasts to use with your Mindbender. So we're going to get into Void Form. Very first cast is a Void Bolt. So I'm playing Hungering Void, so I want to cast as many Void Bolts as possible to extend my my Void Form as long as possible. But I'm also trying to keep my Mindbender up for as long as possible, so I need to cast as many Mind Blasts and Shadow Word Deaths as possible. And luckily, you can kind of balance the two, so you just go Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. And you'll see that I do that. So if you watch Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt. And then right here, it's kind of hard to see, but down here, kind of in the dark, this is where my Shadow Word Death button is. It just barely came off cooldown. I'm not tracking it anywhere up here, so you can't really see, but my Shadow Word Death just came off cooldown. So after that Void Bolt, instead of casting another Mind Blast, which I can't anyway because I'm out of charges, I'm going to cast a Shadow Word Death. Usually you don't cast Shadow Word Death, but because my Mindbender is out, I am going to cast it because it'll extend my Mindbender and it'll do the Shadow Flame rift damage or whatever. So okay, then after that Shadow Word Death, I cast the Devouring Plague to not overcap on Insanity, and now I've got my Mind Blast and my Void Bolt both off cooldown. So right here, it's kind of, you probably want to cast your Void Bolt first, but I'm casting my Mind Blast first just because it came off a little bit before the Void Bolt did. I'm going to cast Mind Blast and the Void Bolt, Devouring Plague. I throw in a Mind Flay there because I had nothing to press immediately. And then I'm going to cast another Mind Blast right here. And hopefully this will extend. This will do one more Rift. Okay, it didn't, so I ran out of time. So now my Mindbender is done. I've got 0.6 seconds left on Void Form. And so I'm not gonna have time to cast another Void Bolt. I cast this one. If it crits, I may have another second. It looks like it doesn't hit before my Void Form drops, so now I'm just back into my regular, like, maintenance rotation. So this is the rotation that you're gonna want to do outside of Void Form. So basically, I spend with Devouring Plague, I build with my Mind Blasts, and then whenever I can't cast anything else, you want to save your Shadow Word Deaths, by the way. Don't just cast it right now. It's only if the boss were low enough for the execute damage, you could cast it, but because it's not, I'm just going to hold on to it. My Shadow Word Pain right here is lighting up because it's under 4 seconds, which means I can cast it again and get the pandemic, or whatever it's called, epidemic, I think, where it adds the remaining duration to the next one. Yeah, so then I'm going to Mind Flay to help generate Insanity. I cast the Devouring Plague, I reapply my Shadow Word Pain, another Mind Blast, my Vampiric Touch is low, so I reapply that. Then right there I do something that you can only do if you're a Blood Elf. If you have 35 Insanity and you cast Arcane Torrent will give you 15 Insanity. So what I try to do is I get up to, let me go back just a little bit so you can see. So right here, I'm at 14 Insanity. My Mind Blast goes off, I'm at 23. My Vampiric Touch goes off, it puts me at 28. I Mind Flay a little bit, I'm at 34. And then if you watch very closely, this next tick of Mind Flay is going to put me over 35. And I'll cast my Void Torrent. This will put me up to 50, which is where this line is. And 50 is how much you need to cast the Devouring Plague. So this is just a small little min-maxy thing. Instead of spending more time just casting Mind Flay, I cast my Arcane Torrent, which puts me over. I'm at 52, and then I can immediately Devouring Plague, right? So then instead of having that Devouring Plague come out a couple globals later, it comes out right now. So then I'm back into the Mind Flay, Mind Blast, Mind Flay, and then something that I wanted to mention is while you're channeling Mind Flay and your Mind Blast is on cooldown, you can just spam your Mind Blast button. For me, it's 3. So that if you get any Dark Thoughts procs, you want to spend them immediately. So if you get any Dark Thoughts procs, they'll immediately go off if you're spamming your Mind Blast button. So while you're channeling Mind Flay, almost always, unless you're like intentionally saving the Dark Thoughts proc for something else, you can just press Mind Flay, spam your Mind Blast button while it's on cooldown, and then as soon as your Mind Flay runs out, press Mind Flay again if that's what you're gonna do. So right there, I get a Dark Thoughts proc and I use it immediately because I was spamming the button. So okay, then I'm gonna cast Devouring Plague. I reapply my Shadow Word Pain. I'm just keeping my dots up, my Mind Blast. Right here, I'm spamming the Mind Blast button. It doesn't go off. I don't get any procs. Okay, so then right here, my Mindbender comes back off cooldown. And now I want to make a clarification here. So a lot of people will ask, do I need to save my Mindbender for my Void Form so that I get them both at the same time? Or is it better to just use them on cooldown? And the answer is, it depends a little bit. So if you're playing a Night Phase Shadow Priest, then you can treat your Void Form cooldown as about 1 minute and 10 seconds, maybe 1 minute 15, if you're not playing completely optimally, right? So let's say it's 1 minute 10, and your Mindbender cooldown is 1 minute, right? So depending on the length of the fight, you're gonna get however many Mindbender casts, right? So over let's say a 6-minute fight, you'll cast Mindbender 6 times if you use it on cooldown. And if you have your Void Form on a 1 minute 10-second cooldown, you'll only cast that 5 times, because then you'll cast the 5th one at 5 minutes and 50 seconds, right? So the thing I'm trying to say is, because they're off by 10 seconds, your Mindbender comes up 10 seconds faster than your Void Form, then over time, you'll get an additional cast of Mindbender, because the first one comes out at 0 seconds. Let's say they both go at 0 seconds, so Void Form and Mindbender come out at 0 seconds. And then a minute later, Mindbender comes out, and then 10 seconds later, Void Form comes out. And then a minute after that Mindbender you just cast, you'll cast another one, but then you won't get another Void Form for 20 seconds. And then the next time you cast Mindbender, you won't get another Void Form for 30 seconds, right? And over time, that'll eventually get to a minute, right? In which case, you have enough time to cast a Mindbender, and then by your next Void Form, you'll have your Mindbender up again. So the short way of saying that is, if the fight is less than 6 minutes long, maybe 6.5, then yes, save your Mindbender and only use it with Void Form. If the fight is more than 6.5, 6 minutes, then no, don't save it, because you'll lose a use of it. Sorry, that was kind of complicated and probably didn't come across very well. But if you join my Discord, I can talk to you more about it. Anyway, there's a link in the description to join my Discord, and I can explain things in more depth there if you're really interested. But short answer, use Mindbender only with Void Form, only when the fight is less than 6.5, close to 6 minutes, something like that. So otherwise, use it on cooldown. So right here, the boss is at 98% health. My Mindbender just came off cooldown. This fight is going to last more than 6 minutes. At least that's what I'm pretending, right? Because this guy will never actually die. So I'm just going to cast it on cooldown, because you've already seen Mindbender plus Void Form. So now I'm going to show you the rotation of just Mindbender without Void Form. So Mindbender without Void Form looks like this. So you cast Mindbender, you cast your Shadow Word Death, you cast your Mind Blast, reapply your dots. Okay, a Devouring Plague, a Mind Flay, and then I should yeah, there we go. Then you want to use your Dark Thoughts procs as soon as possible. So you want to make sure just basically all you're doing with your Mindbender outside of Void Form is keeping your Shadow Word Death and your Mind Blast on cooldown at all times. Your Mind Blast should be on cooldown at all times anyway, but because you have Mindbender out, it's extra important. And then you're going to want to spend a lot of time casting Mind Flay to try and generate Dark Thoughts procs. Because your Dark Thoughts procs, every time you use them, they count as a Mind Blast. So your Mindbender is going to extend by 1 second every time you cast a Dark Thoughts proc. So you want to try and you want to keep all 3 dots up for as long as possible. So you are going to spend with Devouring Plague occasionally, but you don't want a Devouring Plague immediately every time, because you're trying to get a lot of Dark Thoughts procs if you can. So I'm Mind Flaying, I'm spamming my Mind Blast button, I cast my Devouring Plague, I Shadow Word Death immediately, and then I Mind Blast immediately, and now I'm out of time. But luckily, this is like a perfect timing where as soon as my Mindbender is done, my Void Form comes up. So now I can just swap into the Void Form rotation. So we're not going to have Mindbender in this Void Form rotation. So now the rotation is going to be a little different. So instead of going Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, you're going to try and get as many Void Bolts as possible. So I'm going to Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, and then my Fey Guardians comes off cooldown. So I can't spend on a Devouring Plague yet. This Mind Blast I don't think will give me enough either. And my Void Bolt is 1 second away from being on cooldown. So I'm going to cast Fey Guardians, which will give me... This is Grove Invigoration. It's a Soulbind trait from Naya. It'll give me 12 stacks of that, which gives you a ton of mastery. So I'm going to pop it as soon as possible while I'm in Void Form. So I throw it out there. This Druid comes flying into the frame. And then my Void Bolt's going to be off cooldown, so I'm going to use that. And then right after I Void Bolt, I've got enough for a Devouring Plague. So typically, my Mind Blast was off cooldown, right? So if I was playing, if I had Mindbender up right now, I would have Mind Blasted instead of Devouring Plague. But because Mindbender is not up, I cast Devouring Plague, and now I'll cast the Mind Blast, and then I'll cast my Void Bolt, right? And then the goal here is just spend with Devouring Plague, cast Void Bolt as often as possible. My Void Bolt comes off cooldown again, so I cast it, then I Devouring Plague, and now I'm out of Void form. So now I'm back to the regular old rotation of having none of my cooldowns up. But something that you might notice, if I can, I'll just hit play real quick. Keep an eye right here. My Power Infusion has 14 seconds before it's off cooldown. My Mindbender has 14 seconds before it's off cooldown. And my Soul Letting Ruby has 14 seconds before it's off cooldown. So we're, a minute 48 into the fight, and all three of these things are going to come off cooldown at the same time. This will be another really big damage spike, because I'll have Power Infusion, I'll have my super high crit from Soul Letting Ruby. Actually, my Grove Invigoration is going to fall off right before they go off. That would have been really nice to have both of those at the same time. But and then I'm going to also have Mindbender out. So I'll hit play, and you can see they're cooling down at basically the exact same rate. And actually, if you look right here, 9.2 seconds left till my Mindbender is up, and 9.4 until Power Infusion is up. So that's super nice. And something that I'm going to try and do is before I get into that Mindbender, Power Infusion, Soul Letting Ruby combo, is I'm going to reapply my dots so that I don't have to worry about reapplying my dots during that combo, during that rotation, right? So right here I'm casting Mind Flay. I'm going to cast this Dark Thoughts proc immediately if I can, which I do. And then we got 5 seconds left, and something you'll notice is that I cast that Mind Blast. Mind Blast has a 5 or 4 second cooldown on it. So I stop casting Mind Blast when there are less than 6 seconds left on the cooldown of my Mindbender, so that I have a Mind Blast ready when I cast my Mindbender. So right here I should be applying my Vampiric Touch again. Let's see. I do. Okay, good. And then I'm casting Mind Flay, and then right here, everything lines up. My Mind Blast comes off cooldown, my Mindbender comes off cooldown, Power Infusion and Soul Letting Ruby all come off cooldown. I'm going to pop my... So I used that Dark Thoughts proc. That was a mistake. I should not do that. I was about to pop my Mindbender, so what I should have done is used Mindbender, Dark Thoughts proc, and then I have another Mind Blast to extend my Mindbender a little bit. But it's not a huge mistake. I'm just so used to popping those Dark Thoughts procs as soon as possible. Anyway, so I cast Power Infusion, Mindbender, Soul Letting Ruby, Shadow Word Death, and then Mind Blast, then a Devouring Plague, and now I'm in the Mindbender rotation outside of Void form. Except I'm a little bit faster because I have Power Infusion. And I'll be doing a little bit more damage because I have Soul Letting Ruby. So I just go back into the regular rotation. I get a proc of Dissonant Echoes, which is super nice, because once that hits, you get this debuff where you're doing more damage to the target, which is super nice, and I get another proc, so then I use that again, and again, this is just the Mindbender rotation. I get a Devouring Plague. I've got 0.5 seconds left on my Mindbender. I may not have a Devouring Plague, a Dark Thoughts proc, so I'm going to use that as soon as possible. It extends my Mindbender a little bit longer, which gives me time to get a Devouring Plague off and then continue with the rotation. So this is basically how it goes. I'm going to get one more Void form right here because my Void Eruption just came off cooldown. Something you'll notice is right there I cast Mind Blast and then Void Eruption. That's because when you cast Void Eruption, it gives you 2 charges of Mind Blast. So if you can, you want to put your Mind Blast on cooldown and then cast Void Eruption, because then you cancel the cooldown. You immediately get 2 more charges, right? So then I'm back into the Void form rotation, and this is basically the end of everything. That I'm not going to have anything else to say after this. So yeah, hopefully that helps you. I'm sorry it was such a long, in-depth video, but hopefully you can kind of understand why I made the choices that I did. Again, just the key points. Whenever you're playing Shadowflame Prism and you have Mindbender, make sure you're trying to use your Mindbender as often as possible. if the fight is less than 6.5 or 6 minutes or so, you want to use Mindbender with your Void Form every time. If it's a long fight like Council or maybe Sire Denathrius, then you want to use Void Form, or not Void Form, you want to use your Mindbender as much as possible, and don't line it up with Void Form. The other little things to say, while Mindbender is active, you want to keep Shadow Word Death and Mind Blast. You want to cast Shadow Word Death and Mind Blast as often as possible. While Void Form is active, you want to cast your Void Bolts as much as possible. That's to extend the duration of your Void Form. Yeah, then outside of that, use your Power Infusion off cooldown whenever you can. You don't have to line that up with anything. You could do the same thing that I did with the Mindbender and the Void Form cooldowns and say that, Void Form is a 110 and Power Infusion is a 2 minute, so every 3 times you use it, you could have had an extra Void Form, right? So you could do the math with that to try and find out what fight lengths you should save your Power Infusion for your Void Forms, but it's only going to be like a 3-minute fight. But in that case, that's something good to know, so look into that. And then, so use all your stuff as often as possible. And that's basically it. So, like I said before, there's a link to my Discord server in the description below if you want to check it out. I talk to people a lot in there, so if you have more in-depth questions or you want to ask me something personally, feel free to join. I stream on Twitch occasionally. I haven't been doing it super often recently, but sometimes I'll stream our raids, so if you want to come, participate, then feel free to follow me on Twitch. Other than that, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, do all the stuff that makes the YouTube algorithm happy, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.